Thank you, Victor, so much. I think we have maybe what may be the most unique panel of the entire session, and certainly among some of the most unique people here. I myself, for instance, am a social scientist and a policy person, not an oceanographer. We also have with us today the founder of Google Ocean Program and a very enthusiastic mother of 2 young children. We have a bona fide high school teacher and a volcanist. We have a Canadian. Oh, I'm sorry. And a microbiologist who actually really sincerely cares and is curious about how people learn. We have an artist and an intense observer who really fell in love with ocean critters. We have an ad man and the inventor of a 360-degree Seaview camera. And oh, by the way, I just need to make a special mention. Behind the scenes, helping us set up this entire panel is an extraordinary science communicator and a sea ship webcast addict, Mary Miller. Do you just want to sort of wave? And thank you so much for helping us get started. First of all, let me just say John Delaney. I just had to say that, get it out of the way so that no one else in the panel is tempted to go ahead and throw John's name in there for any reason. But more importantly, I think we're going to try a little bit different format. I mean, we are, of course, talking about engagement. And so I think we're going to try to be a bit deliberatively provocative. We're going to take it question and answer, Phil Donahue style. We'll kind of get these guys warmed up and started and then turn it over to you. So we're going to cover a lot of ground very, very quickly and then invite each of you guys to drill down in depth on certain topics that may come on up. And if we've done our job well, hopefully we will have changed at least some of your minds about what this whole very complex field of science communication and learning is all about. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and the way I'd like to get started is maybe to go right back to the very beginning of this meeting and to bring up the fact that I think Wendy Schmidt really challenged all of us as a major part of the mission of this conference and our world to create a caring public. And if you listen very carefully to Wendy and also to Eric, one of the interesting things is about 3/4 of their conversation actually had to do about engagement with communities outside of our own. The science was one part, but communication, governance, management, our children and our adults, our seed corn, if you want to think of it that way, really has been sort of a big part of their challenge to all of us. And let me just say for the record that this is as serious a field of endeavor and research as any other. The social science, social psychology, cognition, economics, political science. I'm a political economist myself. Boy, if you think invertebrates are a difficult thing to study, you really ought to get involved in what actually constitutes human learning and human behavior. But that is, in essence, what we're talking about here today. So what I'd like to start with, perhaps, just to get us warmed up and get a good start, sort of kind of talking about our purpose and our theory of action. If I can have the first slide, please. Is this the most important session? Quite seriously, why is this always the afterthought? Why is this the last panel of the day? Why is this not integrated in an ultimate purpose of all of your work? It really, I think, for a lot of us, is a very a vexing question. So I want to just ask the panel and help us get started. Is this the most important session?
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, that was an easy question. As you mentioned, I am an ex-ad man, and I think I bring quite a unique perspective to this symposium and indeed this panel. I look at public communication and engagement, and I do see it really as the weak link. But by being the area of weakness, it is also the greatest opportunity. And I am very, very excited when I come here and listen to all these talks about the opportunity that communication can offer. If you look at ocean science as a product, it is a great product. And what's more, it is really, really needed. It's all about communication. And I think Wendy summed it up brilliantly yesterday when she said, this is a quest for the most essential knowledge humans have ever needed. Now, as an ad man, I look at that quote and I see that as a great advertising brief. And all we need to do is sell it. For me, it is quite an easy sell when you look at it, the statement like that. And really, it is the solution, really, to the funding issues and a lot of the issues that you're facing. If we get the communication right, if we get the public behind ocean science, then we solve the issues. Just on one last point, the crux of the issue for me is there's been too much focus on the engagement and the education and not enough on the advertising and the promotion. And that is quite a simple solution.
Okay. Who else wants a shot at that one?
What I'd like to add to that is a feeling and a sense of urgency. We had it brought up yesterday in one of the talks and a number of the discussions. The industrialization of the ocean and of the deep ocean, we're living that right now, and there's more coming. And if we're to, and in many cases, this is happening to complete ignorance of the general public. We don't see it. We don't know it's there. And yet it's slowly ramping up to involve environmental and resource exploitation on a scale that we have never seen in the lifetime of humanity on this planet. So there is a real urgency to communicate an understanding of the oceans to the general public and to our funding agencies, to our politicians, to our regulators, and also an understanding of what's coming.
Yeah. Great. Kim? Anyone else? Jennifer?
I'm not sure if just talking is going to work. Okay. All right. Sorry. Technology. I was just going to say, Richard and I have been working over the last couple of years on bringing the image you see right here, underwater street view, to a large consumer audience in Google Maps. And Steve Silverman, who's here in the audience, and I have worked on the Google side. Our goal has been to really look at bringing this engaging content to a general consumer audience. So Google Maps has over 1 billion users a month. Google Earth has been downloaded 1 billion times. It's available in 37 languages. And it really started as a project. Sylvia Earle, the big ocean explorer, she said, I love Google Earth, but you should call it Google Dirt. This is about 6 years ago because you're missing all the ocean. And we're like, Sylvia, you're right. We're missing all the ocean. And one of our execs invited her to come give a tech talk at Google, and that led to a lot of us working on how you would add this ocean. And we've worked with many people in this room over the last several years to build the map of the ocean. And I think by thinking about how all the science data can get into a consumer product and be accessible and available to anyone is one kind of powerful way of communicating ocean science to a larger audience. And it kind of, I think, is a potential tool in the arsenal of tools, and we look forward to continuing to expand that.
Great. So let's go right to the next question. Next question? Next slide. Thank you. Yes. Is the real action for us in schools? I think there's always an assumption that, in fact, that's the easiest audience to serve. And just a couple quick facts on that regard. It turns out that up to the age of 18, you have about 105,000 waking hours. Even while you're in school, you're only in school for 15,000 hours. And in fact, of those 15,000 hours, you're lucky if you have 1,800 hours of science instruction. So what the heck are we doing with the other 90,000 hours that you're not in school as a kid, and the other 310,000 hours that you're an adult, waking hours? So is the action in the schools or not? Go ahead, Allison.
So I think action in the schools is critical. We definitely need to move towards a more ocean literate public. And in order to do that, we need a strong foundation in the classroom. But, as you said, there's a lot more opportunity outside of the classroom. We've been hearing a lot about telepresence. Many of us are very involved in telepresence activities from sea. Some of us, have very large efforts towards that, and some of us are just kind of beginning to get video on ships and streaming, but it's critical. And it's enabling a transparency to the process of ocean research, to a window of who's on board and who's making that happen that just hasn't been there before. So that's very exciting, I think, as an educator, as a scientist. It's just having a transparency to the process, open data. It's a really fantastic thing. Public venues like the Exploratorium, National Aquarium, tapping into those resources from sea through our research. With Ocean Exploration Trust, from the Nautilus, we're doing over 1,500 interactions with informal venues while we're at sea. So there's a huge audience that's there, and they're really excited and engaged. So that's really exciting. Citizen science activities, like Beth brought up earlier, following the leads of some really great efforts that are already out there, like Zooniverse and Galaxy Zoo. All those efforts are kind of paving the path and allowing us to kind of follow their great lead. And a lot of other, I'll also, speak to kind of the social media efforts that a lot of people are engaged in. So I know like Julie Huber is very active in tweeting when she's at sea. And that's just using the pre-existing networks that are already in place. And it's really tapping into how people find their information now. In 2010, I think Pew Research did a pretty interesting study where they polled undergraduates and how they get their news. And they quoted one undergrad that said, if it's that important, the news will find me. And so if we use that, and seek them out rather than waiting for them to seek us out, it's, we're gonna tap into a much larger network.
Lily?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that there's a lot of emphasis on educating children, and I think that's very important to make sure our next generation is informed. But we are at a crucial moment right now, and we need the entire public, including adults, to be literate and informed about what's going on in the oceans. So I'm an artist, as you mentioned, and my audience is generally a humanities audience. So the image you see here is a gallery exhibition that I had with some of my paintings of marine invertebrates. I mostly paint deep sea marine invertebrates. And you can see that, what's happening in the photograph is a panel I organized in conjunction with my show. So I had 3 of the scientists that I'd been collaborating with leading up to the exhibition speak about their work. And almost everybody in the audience is a non-scientist. And I think that what representing these marine invertebrates can do is create awareness of biodiversity and get people to ask questions about what's really out there. I think that everybody actually has a hook into the ocean. Like, it's not that hard to get people excited about it. What we need is to make sure that knowledge is accessible to all kinds of people. And so, variety is the spice of life. If we can get people surrounded from all angles, not just visiting aquariums or museums, but through the humanities, through art, music, poetry. An unnamed scientist here brings poets to sea. We've been banned from mentioning him. So there are all kinds of ways to reach audiences besides just traditional routes. Obviously, documentary, TV, all those mass media platforms are great, but interdisciplinary activity creates a story and demonstrates that non-scientists can engage in this scientific world.
So let me push you guys just a little bit harder on the same question, sort of as a systems point of view. If you really look at, for instance, the hundreds of thousands of hours that are going into school reform and how complicated and regulated and full that system is and everything that you're trying to accomplish during those school hours, and we only have so many resources, so much energy that we can put into the system, and thinking of the formal system being probably the most heaviest and most difficult to sort of move. If you had to prioritize audiences, who would you go after first and why?
Parents.
Parents.
We can't leave it entirely up to the school system and the schools to educate our young people and make them ocean literate. As someone pointed out yesterday in one of our discussions, I'm not quite sure who it was, that someone had set up an informational website destined for schools to help support ocean literacy in schools, and in fact, the primary users of the website were parents, helping their kids with their homework, trying to get a little bit ahead of their kids so they could actually help them with their homework. So I think that the action may be with the next generation, but it isn't necessarily limited to the schools as a venue for this.
And someone said I don't know who it was yesterday, but Khan Academy is the one that all the parents are using. I would say just from my limited example, I have a 6-year-old who's in kindergarten. They don't really have, that I've seen, any technology in the classroom, like, at least in his, iPads, computers, doing demos. And where I teach him is at home. So, we use YouTube. He loves underwater dinosaurs. We have a layer that we've worked with Sylvia Earle's foundation on. They've curated with lots of contributions from in here that's all education, and you can search on their foundation site. And I'll use that at night to teach him about the oceans. And he loves things like great white sharks and poisonous jellyfish. And his litmus test is video. Like if you show him a photo, he's like, no, this doesn't play, it's broken. And I think, it's very telling. Like a 6-year-old, his interest and how to engage him. I think it's at least my little sandbox example. And I think though, if you can make tools really easy to use, and maybe apps are a future thing because he plays iPad apps all the time. I think that you can create creative ways that can, support what the teachers are teaching in the classroom. And actually, I've gone into his classroom when he was in Google Preschool and given talks and bring it to them that way. But in an ideal world, we'd have actually required ocean curriculum, right, in the school system. But that doesn't exist. So you have to do informal ways, I think.
Richard, left wing.
Yeah, for me, it's about media and influencers. We put virtually all our resources into influencing the media because it's the best way of communicating out to a mass audience. And to do that, you've got to be extremely professional. You need to hire the best people with the best contacts to then get out to that mass audience. And when we talk about media, it's not just traditional media. Looking at, obviously, our partner with Google. Google is a media. We've got 3 million followers for our project purely because of using that media.
The platform. Fantastic.
I would add educators in there too.
Okay.
I mean, it's just, it's critical. There's a huge void of ocean science and curriculum. Luckily, with the new science standards that have just come out, there is actually mention of the ocean in the curriculum, but it's still, the average person has a basic understanding at a 6th grade level. And we can't have policymakers be judging policies at a 6th grade.
Okay, I'm going to stop here. Well, because I see everybody getting charged up. We're going to keep moving through the questions. Next slide, please. Did Cousteau have it easy? Who wants that one?
Yes and no. I think he was in a unique position to reveal the underwater environment for the first time, really, through the power of television. But he didn't have the tools that we have available today, which make it even easier. The problem we have today is there's certain baggage that we have, whereas I think Cousteau did a brilliant job at the time, but it was a very, very professional approach, and we need that same approach now.
Kim?
Cousteau had it easy because he had technology that allowed him to share the oceans with the general public. And he was also a really good storyteller. Wasn't much of a scientist, but he was a really good storyteller. And I'm here today because of Cousteau. I grew up in the middle of the Canadian prairies in Saskatchewan when Cousteau's National Geographic specials were coming on television. And I was glued to the television every day. And I had decided by the time I was 12 years old that I wanted to be an oceanographer. So I'm not saying that one little impact like that is critical, but what I think we have new tools today that can do essentially the same thing that Cousteau did, but share the oceans with the public in a much broader and diverse and instantaneous way. We don't have to wait for the film to be edited and assembled and put together in a National Geographic special, as we'll be talking about earlier. We can live stream. We can use social media. We can get people engaged. We have access to this technology, and in the same imaginative way that Cousteau did, we need to use those tools to tell stories, to get people intrigued.
So let me pick up your point, Kim, because I think it's a very good one, which is you had a very emotional connection that brought you sort of in. One thing we understand about learning is that there is an emotional component to it. I mean, somehow you get hooked on it. Somehow it touches you in some sort of personal way. And of course, for so many people, oceans are much more remote than, let's say, the cosmos and the sky. So how do we really, I mean, to watch a lot of data flying by, you know, bits of information or sort of long-term, you know, data frames, where do we bring the emotional component back in, or at least the best we understand about learning theory?
I don't know about learning theory, but one thing that we've been trying to do is we have this sort of Google Earth and surround display that you walk into, and it's like large panels. It's called the Liquid Galaxy, and we've been donating them to museums. So we donated one to, this pictured here is the Oceanographic Museum in Monaco, and you see one of Richard's divers with a pole cam. That's one of the underwater street view cameras. And we've been putting ocean content. So there's tours that we've worked with scientists on with Google Earth where you fly around the ocean and learn about it. There's like a Cousteau tour that flies to different snippets of his films. There's also all the underwater street view imagery in surround. And they told me it's their most, like one of their most popular exhibits. They have long lines. They're trying to figure out how to, you know, make it more accessible to more people. I think it can be really powerful. People walk in and they find their house, and that's their like reference point, and then they can then go and explore the ocean and see tours. And I should say the additional thing we've been doing is Google Plus lets you do Hangouts on air, so that anyone can join your Hangout. So you're basically become a live broadcaster, and then it gets saved as a YouTube video. And so Richard and we've been working on these Hangouts with his divers actually on the reef, and then projecting that into Plus, and then doing Hangouts in the Liquid Galaxy with him, with explorers like Bob Ballard, Don Walsh, Sylvia Earle, and they really tell the story and bring it to life. And I think that is, again, another powerful tool, like kind of trying to bring all of these things and interpret them for a large, you know, educational museum audience.
Yeah. Richard?
Yes, I mean, 99.9% of people don't dive and probably never will. So we need to give them an immersive experience that really touches them. And to do that, you need to have, well, technology is now there to do it. It's about creating that full experience. So it's the sound, it's the attention to detail, it's the layers of information. And we're there now. We can do this and we can roll it out. It's just a case of actually doing it.
Okay. Let's go to the next slide. What can we learn about engagement from the other disciplines? I mean, it strikes me, for instance, that often we sort of imply, if not make explicit, that part of the communication education challenge in the ocean sciences is to move people from understanding to action. But for instance, I noticed that in fact there's no health or medical professionals here. And I would argue that health and medical professionals may know more about how information and behavior interact than most of us in this room. So who else should be at this table?
Am I answering?
Yeah, go for it, Lily. I think we do mention the arts here.
Well, I'm here, and that's partly because you mentioned story. Well, Kim mentioned storytelling. You mentioned an immersive experience. Dennis mentioned this emotional connection, and I think all of that is really key in inspiring people, and that is sort of the job of art. The ideal successful artwork is all of those things. It's immersive, it tells a story, and it creates an emotional connection with the audience. And then on top of that, Wendy Schmidt brought up something really interesting, which is her ray of hope for change is human nature's desire to ask questions and this inquisitive aspect of all of us. And the job of art is to, contemporary art, is to make its viewers think and ask questions. And viewing art is not a passive activity. That's sort of the distinction between that and watching TV. It's an active engagement. So somebody looking at a painting is supposed to actively engage with that painting. So I think that is something that art actually shares with the kernel of science, what drives science. And so that's part of what's been so wonderful about being able to collaborate directly with scientists, because we share that desire to inspire curiosity in our audience. And this image is from being at sea with Scripps expedition. And during that expedition, somebody on the ship had the idea for me to use the sediment that we were bringing up from using the multi-core. So we were sieving out this fauna, and then each day we were on the ship, I would use the leftover sediment to make a painting of the fauna that came from that core. So this is a painting of a sirachalid, and then the next day I would wash it off and make a new one. So that sort of interaction, just on a personal level, was great.
Removable graffiti. Nice.
Right. Street art at sea.
So what other disciplines should be at this table?
Well, for me, I would love to see more advertisers. I'd love to see more PR people. I would love to see sponsorship managers. I'd love to see corporates. These are the people we should all be talking to and getting ideas from. You've only got to look at some of the examples out there, such as, right down to sports. They are run so professionally. They've got lots of funding coming in because they have a clear mission. They are well branded. They use the best communicators. And this is what ocean science, in my view, should be doing. It's got a great, great mission, and it should have great, great support.
Yeah. Okay. So how much time do we have left before the... what's
15 minutes.
Okay. So we should probably open this up. But let's get to one last question, and I'll give you, Allison, the first whack at it. So let's go 2 slides forward, if I could. 1 slide, 2. I'll read the one more. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, is it easier to train scientists to engage the public or to turn great communicators into ocean enthusiasts? Allison?
I'm going to dodge it a little bit by saying I think it's a happy medium between the two. I think we definitely need informed communicators, and we also need to empower scientists to be better storytellers. There are a lot of really charismatic and really wonderful storytellers in our community, but I think we could all be better served by improving and honing in on our storytelling skills.
But how do we do that? Wish it to happen?
No, I think we involve more communicators. I think a lot of people are starting to take videographers to sea with them, and they're very well trained at framing and capturing the stories. And so I think it's a variety of mechanisms and tools that people use.
So let's ask you guys for questions. What questions do you have for this panel? Several over here. Yes? Yes. Thank you.
Hi, John Racanelli, the National Aquarium. A couple of the people on the panel and others in the room here have heard this treatise that I've been on to here, and I want to ask the panel specifically about it, which is that this is a room full of knowledge experts. This is a room full of people who are pursuing important things and who are, as the knowledge experts, are determining the importance of the things they have to tell. But the interesting challenge that we face, and we see this in managing a large public serving aquarium, is that the marketplace, which means the public, or what we used to in the bad old days call the unwashed public, determines the relevance. And so, when I think about the way we're all trying to make ourselves more relevant in terms of social media, in terms of earned and owned media, in terms of free choice learning, we are constantly looking for ways to do that. And as I'm sitting here through these last 2 days, I've been thinking, how do we create a higher level of relevance for what's being learned here to this public that only 30% of whom have even taken a college-level science course in their lives? So that's my question for the panel is how can we make this important information more relevant to our public?
And for me, it's a single-minded, motivating mission. If you're clear about what everyone is doing and you filter the information that goes out to the public, then you'll have support. The problem is we've got so many different messages going out about what's important, what people are studying. It's not clear, in my view. So it's just making sure it's clear and motivating.
Well, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I think there are a lot of different messages going out because there is a lot going on, and it is a challenge to get the public to feel empowered that what they do actually impacts this world we live in. So I think creating an emotional connection, making people aware of the extensive biodiversity that's out there because people connect with other life forms, but then also geothermal activity. I mean, that's sexy, like making the ocean is glamorous and it's exciting. It's this space of intrigue and mystery, and to get people excited about that, I think will bring forward a curiosity and action.
I
Jenifer?
think one other idea, prizes. So this picture is a picture of Sylvia Earle winning the TED Prize in 2009, and her TED Prize wish was to save more of the ocean into protected areas, engage the public, and that after her talk, someone, Addison Fisher, donated $1 million right away, and the whole TED community really got behind her wish. It led to the TED Galapagos trip with a ton of people on it. It had huge ramifications of like people coming in to fund things around the ocean, like support for the NRDC Arctic, the creation of the Ocean Elders, the creation of the Oceans 5 Alliance, the Sargasso Sea Alliance, and a bunch of other things. And I think prizes like Wendy Schmidt, the Acidification X Prize, I think prizes can inspire people to get behind and be creative about solutions. And you're all about kind of working towards a mission. So that could be one potential tool to engaging a larger audience.
Okay. Next question.
P. Gerges, Harvard University. I'm kind of back here.
Oh,
I guess.
there we go.
I have a question and then a comment. So my first question is, growing up, there was, I had a healthy dose of boredom in my life, right? Like many of us. You sit around at night and it was either kind of watch Jacques Cousteau or, a rerun of All in the Family, right? And so, as a kid, you watch Jacques Cousteau, and I have to say that there's something about, how packaged that was and how almost exotic it was that completely captured my attention, right? And so my question to you all is, we live in a day where, students are saturated. They're just like saturated. The public is saturated. There's ocean sciences, there's space sciences, there's reality TV, which I still don't get, but there's just this huge kind of influx of information. Much of it is really exciting. So how do we distinguish ourselves in that landscape? That's the question. The brief comment, and I'll keep it short, is that I love to speak to the public about what I do. I would like to see my students trained by professionals, right? And that's my challenge to this group, is how can we provide our students with the opportunity to be trained professionally with engaging the public, right? Not just sort of winging it. So I'll leave it at that.
Great. So I'm going to toss this question over to Jenifer, because I think this point that John Delaney made yesterday too, the one thing about Jacques Cousteau is one-way transmission. And you were the passive recipient on the other end of that transmission. And I do think there's something that does connect up back to the data that we're producing here and that question of interactivity. And this may be a perfect time, Jenifer, just for you to share your quick demo and talk a little bit about it. What does make Google Ocean so popular?
I think, and I should see if that works. Live demos. I should say that that Google Earth has been made possible for Michael Jones, who's here in the audience, and he's been, along with Eric Schmidt, John Hankey, and Ryan McLennan, a big sponsor of this project. I think what I wanted to show real quick, as far as engaging, I've seen a lot of people use Google Earth to engage with the public and start to tell stories about the ocean. So I think since it's a free consumer product in 37 languages, it can be a part of the story for communicating. And I guess I just wanted to say, I think one of the powerful parts of it is that you can start at a place that you know, like your backyard. And then you can go to places that are remote and you feel like you have, here we are in Waikiki, you feel like you have a starting place. A sort of like reference point for what, for most people, the ocean is distant and far away. So that's, we have 3D models of places like the Royal Hawaiian where we just were. And I think then you can, though, go offshore and fly underwater. And this is the Luihi Seamount, which, as I understand it, will be the next Hawaiian island in 1,000,000 years or something like that. And I think, I'm not showing it right here, but there's topography of the seafloor, which is a start. Like I said, Sylvia Earle's foundation, has worked on this sort of education layer. And if the internet were working as well as one might like, you'd see little blue circles with videos and stories from many scientists. And then I wanted to point out that the map of the ocean we've built is from many of the people in this room. And where we have high-res data, much of it from the Columbia, working with the UNOLS fleet in red, and the University of Hawaii, around Hawaii right here in the center of the screen, in Bari and CSU Monterey Bay off the California coast, NOAA, and Scripps for the global grid, and many, many, many others. I think it's a potential tool in the toolbox. I think for, we're going to go now and show Charlie Paul's beautiful data from the Falkor, which we published a few weeks ago. What you can do is you can fly underwater, take people to these places, and then what we'd like to do next with Charlie is, some of what in his beautiful talk he said, put in little snippets of his story. People have about a 3-minute attention span. So putting in little 3-minute clips and then telling a story, bringing it to the Liquid Galaxy, bringing it to YouTube. I think as far as teaching people how to engage, I think YouTube can be a really powerful tool, like the Khan Academy has been using that. And I think teaching people, showing how people have improved, lessons learned, like how you can communicate more effectively, is one thing. Before a TED talk, Duarte Design will go through a TED person's talk slides, make them more impactful, help give feedback on how to make that conversation more engaging. And I think those storytelling sort of components can be taught and learned. And I think it's just, it just needs, someone needs to drive it.
Go ahead, Kim.
The tools help. But back to Pete's question of earlier, why would people even want to listen to us and pay attention? And I come back to something I mentioned at the beginning here, is transmitting this message of urgency to the public, that why should we be worrying about the oceans? Why should we be interested? Okay, there are cool organisms, there's cool geology, all sorts of interesting things that if you're a little bit science-oriented, you'll naturally gravitate to. But if you really want to interest a broader public and you're competing with a lot of other sources of information, from everything from reality TV to Cousteau reruns, I think the way to capture people's attention, and this is not just a trick to compete with other groups, because I think we all agree in this room that our oceans are in trouble, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, and without an informed public, without informed decision makers, we're not going to get very far down that path. And I think we can use that as a lever to get people's attention. Then that's where these tools come to bear. That's where we call in the ad man, because we have a very clear message to get to the public, and we need help getting that message across as efficiently as possible.
Great. We actually are the group that's going to give you guys the most time to ask questions, because we were misreading the timer and finished our prepared questions a few minutes early. So we have 24 more minutes here, and there were a lot of questions out here, so let's keep them coming.
So I'm back here. I'm David with OpenROV, and this is obviously our favorite topic is how do you communicate this? One of the ways that we found is through stories. We had this story of this underwater cave that we wanted to explore. But what we've quickly found is that you'll run into a wall if all you're doing is telling stories. Because you're competing with, so much amazing that's happening on the internet, that's happening everywhere. People are inundated. In order to really break through, I think you have to invite people to be part of a broader narrative. And you have to enable them to tell new stories about themselves. And I think that's the big challenge here, is to figure out what that new narrative is. I think Jacques Cousteau did it right. He said, we live in this amazing world, and you should get out and you should explore. And he invited all of you probably to be a part of that narrative. And I think we got to think about who's coming after us and what the narrative is that we want them to be a part of.
And that makes me think, when you talk about narratives, one of the most effective organizations I've seen in doing that is WildAid. They have worked with celebrities as an engagement tool. Yao Men on shark fin soup, and they've gotten like big ad buys in China, so it reaches through their TV networks a lot of people. And they've used professional ad producers to make those ads, and they've been really effective in reaching a huge number of people and changing people's minds about shark fin soup. So I feel like if you can follow that that's one recipe. I think film is another. I feel like Inconvenient Truth was really amazing at getting people, aware of what was going on, as a start for climate change. And I think, as a response, an outcome of Sylvia's TED Wish, they've made a film called Mission Blue that's going to come out, and I think that is another tool, as far as like reaching, people through film, like, professional storytellers.
So beyond storytelling, what else should we be relying on more?
I'm thinking this is a natural segue into our last slide that we in fact forgot to show. Do we not have a who's doing it right?
Right. Yeah, so provide some great examples. Go ahead, Kim.
Okay. Could we?
Sure.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I'll start by defining the it in this sentence here. From my point of view, what is the it? It is using all these tools that we've talked about to communicate with the public, to share our knowledge of the oceans with the public, particularly online and social media, etc. And who's doing it right? I think that, first of all, what does doing it right mean? I think we can't just assume the fact that if we connect online and make material available to the public, that they will come. I think a lot of us, and certainly myself, from personal experience, if you go to sea with a vessel and you start streaming live video from an ROV, you can't expect everyone to drop what they're doing and tune in. You have to build your audience before that. You have to put a lot of work into preparing this in advance. And I think groups like the Ocean Exploration Trust know how to do this. Perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about how you go about building your audience prior to these events?
Sure. It's been a long time in the making, with Bob Ballard streaming live from sea. And we, of course, take a lot of people to sea with us through telepresence. Many of you have been involved in our Doctors on Call program. So we have various audiences that we build, and we sometimes have 50 scientists following one cruise, asking for samples while we're diving. At the same time, we're pulling in questions from second graders in Puerto Rico about, from their classroom. So we have a large audience, and I think one of the magic ingredients in it is the interactivity. Somebody sends a question in, they hear somebody answer their question within minutes. And I think one of the other ingredients that's really critical is the role models. Everybody that steps on board Nautilus becomes a role model to somebody. And we don't just put the scientists in the limelight. We put the scientists, the engineers, the ship's crew. Everybody has a career on that ship, and anybody watching could fill any one of those roles. And so I think that role model, putting that out there is a really important.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'd put on the table is we have a lot more work and opportunity to do in scientific visualizations. There's sort of this sense that if we put the learning objects out there, we put the data out there, it becomes sort of intuitive for people to use. And of course, everything we know is not at all. But we are seeing things that, the thing I always love to refer to is remember the old Wired info porn page? Where they're able to get, like 10 or 12 variables on that page, but you could still, for most of us, figure out what was going on or spot the interesting patterns and data for yourself. And now that we have these kinds of tools, the opportunities to show more than just A causes B or get an XY axis up there, but in fact to really bring lots of different variables in these very complex systems like oceans and let people play with the visualizations themselves. Who are our visualization makers? Where's the community that can really take a lot of our data and really turn it into really spectacular, powerful, and intuitive visualizations that everybody can play with, not just the in crowd.
It could be even simpler than that by giving access to the public. People can pick things up and run with it. This picture we have here up on the screen is a 14-year-old boy who lives in the Ukraine, and secretly to his parents and also unknown to us at Ocean Networks Canada, we have a number of underwater cameras online down to 2,000 meters depth. And this kid was in his evenings at home after doing his homework, was going online, knowing our camera schedules, and actually recording the video live over the internet from our cameras, and he set up his own YouTube channel called World of Ocean, and he had been saving videos and essentially assembling them by category. And he had like 30, 35 views in the several months that he had. And then one night he saw something strange. And he was sharp enough to recognize it as being unusual. And he contacted us on our information line on Monday morning. We came into work and realized that what he'd seen was at 1,000 meters depth, a hagfish swim into the field of view, and a female northern elephant seal come in and suck up the hagfish and swallow it. So this seal had dove 1,000 meters to the seafloor, saw our lights come on, said, oh, food, and came over and swallowed up this hagfish. And so we decided to take this and run with it. This is a great example of personally motivated citizen science, not a program that we put together in ourselves that was maybe stuck to a rigid formula. So we decided to, after contacting his parents, to publish a web story on this. And within 6 weeks, he'd had over 2 million views on his YouTube channel, and it just keeps building. But he's done this on his own. You know, we gave him a little bit of help, a little boost. You know, he's interviewed by Radio Free Europe, et cetera. But
Yeah. So it's the ocean equivalent of having a kid have an asteroid named after them.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Oh, can we? I think that's a still. Sorry.
Yeah, that's just a screenshot. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, okay, so this is, I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I caveat it by saying I'm not only a big fan of human dimension science, I've actually published some papers recently with them to the horror of my natural scientist friends, and I'm a big believer in PR and advertising, and I think it's exactly right that there's a science problem, there's a communications problem, there's a governance problem. That said, devil's advocate, is ocean literacy or education even of any part of the U.S. national population really the problem? I've agonized over this a lot. I have some very good friends. Catherine Hayhoe, a Canadian, commented to me once very clearly on the difference between the U.S. and Canada when she moved here from Canada, climate scientist, IPCC author. We're living in a country where 50% of the people basically are in some sense climate science deniers. 50% of the people think evolution is just a theory or whatever they want to say. What's the difference between the US and Europe, between the US and Canada, with the US and almost every place else? I agonize over this a lot. It suggests that access to information, education is not actually the problem. There may be something more fundamental.
Yeah, you know, it's a great point. You know, to think of it on the policy and the action side, it always surprises me that, I guess those who aren't in the policy world don't realize that it's a small numbers game. You don't have to win the whole population to get your policy through. There's probably, you know, 8 or 10 people in each one of your specializations that are actually making, you know, the most important decisions for the whole country or the whole world, and knowing who those people are and identifying those influencers and really getting to them matters a whole lot more. And so I do think there's other ways to think about governance change and policy changes that isn't about getting 51% of the population to believe in your message. But it is a fabulous question, you know, to the rest of the panelists. You know, what is it something endemic about the American culture that says we should just stop trying?
Well, I think that, I believe Marcia touched on this in her opening remarks, that citizen science could be an answer to that. People don't have a problem with weather. People believe weather. It's verifiable. So if it's not such, if we don't focus so much on a top-down message, but inspiring critical thinking and inspiring, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but inspiring curiosity, I think that is the key. And I think that great science comes out of, from an outside perspective, comes out of dialogue and not just setting a goal and going towards it, but opening up to exploration. And so to that end, I think that what we need from the public is a way to get them curious and capitalize on the fascinating quality of the ocean, because I think it's easy to fascinate people.
As I understand, there aren't any required ocean curriculum teaching standards, and although there's the California environmental, you could teach that you know, you're not required and you're not tested on it. So I think changing that, which I would assume would take a lot of time. So I think in the interim, again, like Khan Academy, like how about an ocean channel or something like that? I mean, go directly to parents, and then apps. You know, people spend all this time, there are all these educational apps. If you made it really easy, so a teacher could be like, yeah, we're going to do this in our classroom, and that'll teach blah, 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 and they learn, you know, some basic math or something, then you can kind of maybe sneak it in there.
Allison?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the lack of the education. I grew up in Tennessee, so I mean, I grew up in one of the places that didn't have access to ocean education or really a great science education. So I think it does come down to what's in the curriculum and what really needs to be put into the curriculum more.
Okay, so I'll be the devil's advocate on that point. Most people don't know this, but in fact, the United States scores in the top 2 on the 4th grade science test, which is stunning because we don't teach science in elementary school anymore since No Child Left Behind. So there's very little, sort of science at all, but we're still like number 1 or 2 in terms of science learning. So where does that come from? Where does that come from? And I would argue, partly because of the National Science Foundation, that we've had one of the most robust informal science systems anywhere in the world, whether it's media and the Magic School Bus and NPR, or whether it's what's going on right now in our technology world and all the information coming over from places like Google or others. I mean, we know, for instance, that there's 15,000 informal science institutions in this country, and they actually bring in somewhere close to 300 million people a year, more than all professional sports in live stadiums on an annualized basis. So are we looking under the right rock?
Okay, Dennis?
Yep.
Dennis,
Yeah.
why don't you take one final question, if you would, please?
Okay. Where's the microphone?
Mike Coffin.
Yeah, Mike Coffin from the University of Tasmania. Kim's slide there is actually a good introduction to what I'm thinking about, which is linking yesterday and today. Yesterday we talked a lot about platforms and vehicles, but there's one major category which we didn't talk about at all, and that's a vehicle that does not require any capital expenditure, no maintenance expenditure, and no operational expenses. And that is the fellow members of the animal kingdom. The elephant seal is one of those, and it's my favorite because it can dive to over 2,500 meters. Now, I work mainly in the Southern Ocean where elephant seals are routinely instrumented. We've got 120,000 profiles that seals and penguins have collected across the Southern Ocean. These have been shaped by millions of years of evolution. They're perfect platforms in an evolutionary sense in that respect. I guess my question is, it seems like use of these animals, which was originally to understand their ecology, but now we've found out that they're great ocean observers. In fact, Australia's incorporated them into its ocean observing system. There seemed to have been a peak in this use, and now with animal ethics regulations and other impediments, at least in the more developed countries, use of these seems to be declining. And I'm wondering, in the collective wisdom of this room, is this a trend, or is this just an anomaly that we've got to stop using or employing these animals to collect oceanographic data? And that links in with this group. We have, obviously, someone said yesterday, no one wants to grow up to be a robot, but there are dog people, there are cat people, we could have elephant seal people, we could have penguin people if you bring them into an immersive environment. Can we use fellow members of the animal kingdom to help people relate to ocean science? And they're actually teaching us things about ocean science.
Or what about invertebrate people? I mean, let's broaden our view away from just the charismatic megafauna. Look at the charismatic, mesofauna? Because all of those benthic creatures, there's everything in the ocean is really strange and really beautiful, and I think it's a great idea to, use that to connect people. Absolutely.
Or even hagfish people. We heard from Kiro Dutko last week. He's contacting us. He wants to become a hagfish biologist. Can you imagine a more vile creature in the ocean? I don't know if any of you have ever had anything to do with a hagfish, but they are really unpleasant things. But he was so fascinated, not by the elephant seal that ate the hagfish, but he sees more hagfish than elephant seals. And there are other ways to use animals in the ocean as tools for communicating. We don't have to necessarily capture them and glue data packs on their backs. We can just use them as spokesmen for what we're doing to help people discover different parts of the ocean environment. Hagfish are one example. We've certainly seen other people use penguins to discover fisheries in the Antarctic. We all talk about how whales travel through the ocean. We're not about to capture a whale and strap a data pack onto it. But there are other ways to use animals that don't necessarily get us in trouble with the animal rights movement.
Richard, you got the last word?
Well, for me, it's media gold. Whether or not you agree with it or disagree with it, it is extremely valuable for communicating ocean science. Likewise with aquariums. Yes, you've got captive animals, but they are hugely important in engaging people with the oceans.
Dennis?
So I guess if there's a final message from this panel, from all of us, it's that there's this whole other community out there who's actually paid and make their lives and their careers out of translating really complex and important science for the rest of us. And so use us, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. What wonderful panel. We definitely saved the best for last. And of course, that last question was the elephant in the room question, or in this case, the elephant seal in the ocean question. I've got more stories, but fortunately you're spared. But then the bad news is you haven't seen the last of me. So we are delighted to have hosted all these wonderful panels. This concludes today's formal sessions.